Hello everyone, welcome to another Bitcoin Relay tutorial. Since we were unsuccessful in preventing core version 30 from being released, and with the prospect of a soft fork to block spam at a consensus level gaining some traction, I thought I'd focus my efforts on providing tools to help people be more effective in the spam war, and hopefully we'll be able to hold off the prospect of child abuse material ending up in the blockchain long enough for a soft fork to make it through. In today's video, I'm going to demonstrate how to use Garbageman. Garbageman is a defense against the Libre Relay network. So Libre Relay is a fork of Bitcoin Core with wide open mempool policy. Basically, there's no filtration. Anything that's consensus valid will be relayed by the Libre Relay network. Now that would be bad enough in and of itself, but unfortunately, Libre Relay is designed to preferentially peer with other Libre Relay nodes. And so what that means, it creates a direct pipeline for spam to get into a block that it can completely ignore the mempool policy norms of the rest of the network. And so it doesn't matter how many Bitcoin Knots nodes are on the network, for example, the Libre Relay nodes are just going to preferentially peer with each other and bypass the entire rest of the network. And just allow spam free flow through to the blocks. Garbageman is designed to fight back against that. What it is essentially a fork of Bitcoin Knots that disguises itself as a Libre Relay node. It also preferentially peers with Libre Relay nodes, and they preferentially peer with it, thinking it's also a Libre Relay node. But it does not relay the spam transactions. And so there's a bit of a cat and mouse game between Libre Relay and Garbageman's. For example, Garbageman has to keep track of which transactions are received from which peers, so that if a peer asks for an index, it can send them the spam transactions it knows they already know about, so that the Libre Relay node doesn't blacklist the Garbageman node. One way you can think about it is if core version 30 versus Knots are the front line in the spam war, Libre Relay would be sort of the special force, the enemy special forces, and then Garbageman would be sort of agents that are infiltrating the special forces, donning the enemy's uniform, pretending to be one of the enemy and disrupting their warfighting capability. So what I want to show in this video anyway is how to use a tool that I built, which will allow you to launch as many Garbageman nodes as your system resources will allow. And so that we can sort of gain a much larger presence on the Libre Relay network with Garbageman nodes and hopefully slow down the spam that's passing through that particular bypass of the rest of the network. Now we're going to be running this inside of a virtual machine because I don't want you to have to trust me. You're running some code that I wrote on your computer. Now you may trust me, but you shouldn't have to. So we're going to run this in a virtual machine, which will be sandboxed from the rest of your computer. You'll just use that machine to run the script and run Garbageman, and it won't have access to the rest of your computer. So I'm going to show you how to do that. Okay, so the first step is we're going to need to install something called Virtualbox. And that's where we're going to create our virtual machine that'll sandbox your computer from the script that we're going to be running. I'll show you how to do this on Windows, Mac, and Linux. I'll start with Linux since my host here is Linux. You can find Virtualbox in the software store. Based on your particular Linux distro, you just search for Virtualbox. Okay, and there it is, and you can install it from here, Virtualbox. If you can't find it in your software store for your distro, you can also get it online. So we can search for download Virtualbox. Okay, and the place that you want to go is the downloads wiki at virtualbox.org. You can go there. And here you can see that if we click on Linux distributions, we have Virtualbox for a number of distributions. This will be similar to running any other software. If you go this route, you have to take care of any dependencies that come up. So this is the normal Linux sideloading of stuff. So it's usually better to install from your software manager if you have it in your distro. But otherwise, you can download it from here. Okay, so that's how you do it on Linux. Let's see, we'll show on Mac next. Okay, so on Macintosh, you can go to your browser and search for download Virtualbox. Okay, again, we're going to go to the downloads wiki on virtualbox.org. Okay, and then you'll select whichever type of Mac you have. If you're on Apple Silicon, you're going to do this one. If you're on Intel, like I am, you're going to select this one. So we're going to go ahead and click that. Okay, now that it is downloaded, I'm going to go ahead and close the browser here. Then I'm going to go to that file that I downloaded and click on it. All right, and it tells you what to do. You double click on this icon to install it. Go through the instructions. Okay, installation is successful. Go ahead and close. What do you want to do? I'll move the installer to the trash. That's fine. All right, it says it's been added. And so now if I go to the Launchpad, I should see it in here. There it is, Virtualbox. Okay, so that's how you install it on Macintosh. Let me go ahead and close that one. And finally, I'll show it on Windows. And I'm going to complete the rest of the demo actually on Windows because I suspect that's what most people are going to be using. So I'll start with installing Virtualbox. Once we get it installed, we'll continue on with the rest of the demonstration. Okay, so on Windows, we're going to open up our browser. And we actually need to add a prerequisite first before we can install Virtualbox. It's called the Microsoft Visual C++ Redistributable, so search for that. And we want this article on learn.microsoft.com called the Microsoft Visual C++ Redistributable Latest. So we'll click on that. Okay, so take note of the URL. We should be on learn.microsoft.com/enus/cpp/windows/latest supported VC reduced. Okay, so make sure you're on this particular URL. And what we're going to do is click on the latest supported. So we're going to click on latest supported redistributable version. And the version we're going to download is called X64. This one here. Go ahead and download that. Okay. And we'll go ahead and run that. Okay, it says setup was successful. We'll go ahead and close that. All right. Now that we've got the C++ redistributable installed, now we can install Virtualbox. So we're going to search for Virtualbox, download. There, download Virtualbox. And we want to go to the downloads wiki on virtualbox.org. And here we're going to download Virtualbox for Windows hosts. We're going to click on that. Okay, once that's downloaded, we're going to click on it to install it. Gives you a warning about Python core packages. We don't need those for the what we're doing today, so we'll just say yes, we're good, and continue on. Okay, and we're done. We'll go ahead and launch Virtualbox. Close the browser. Okay, so the rest of this tutorial is going to be exactly the same whether you're on Windows, Mac, or Linux. Once you load up VirtualBox, it's going to look like this here. Before we can start, though, we need to download something called Linux Mint, which we're going to install in our virtual machine. That's the operating system we're going to be using. So we're going to go to the browser, and we're going to search for download Linux Mint. Okay, we're going to go to the Linux Mint download page. We're going to download the Cinnamon edition. And then we're going to scroll down to the mirrors, and we're going to click one of the mirrors to download the ISO file. Now, it does have instructions for how to verify that your ISO file is authentic, which you might want to follow. I'm not going to do in this video to save time. Also, this operating system is going to be running inside a virtual machine, so it's not going to have access to your host anyway. So if there's anything nefarious on there, it's not going to have access to your host files. But it's usually a good idea to verify a download anyway, and so the instructions are here for how to do that. Okay, so once our ISO file has been downloaded, we'll go ahead and close the browser. Now that we've downloaded Linux Mint, let's go ahead and create our virtual machine that we're going to use as a sandbox. In VirtualBox, we'll click on the New button. We will give our virtual machine a name. I'm just calling it Garbageman. We need to select the Linux Mint ISO file that we just downloaded. It should be in your downloads folder. Then we're going to uncheck Proceed with Unattended Installation. And then we'll click on Next. Now on this screen, you're going to give it the maximum amount of memory and CPUs that VirtualBox recommends. So you're going to go to wherever the green stops, the green bar here. That tells you the maximum amount that VirtualBox recommends you use based on the resources that you have on your host system. In this case, it looks like we're at about 24 gigabytes, which is exactly 24576 megabytes. For the CPUs, looks like it's going to let me do 8. Yours will be different. Just pick whatever the maximum is on those two bars. Now for the disk size, you need about 80 gigabytes or so for the base system, and then 25 gigabytes per Garbageman instance, roughly. In most cases, if you put 400 gigabytes here, that'll be plenty. Unless you've got a really beefy system with a lot of CPUs and you want to create a lot of instances of Garbageman, then you can make that higher. And it's also going to depend on how much space you actually have. So if you don't have 400 gigabytes, just put whatever amount that you can reserve for running instances of Garbageman. But as a rule of thumb, on most systems, I think 400 gigabytes will be plenty. So we're going to go ahead and click on Next. All right, this just gives us a summary of what it's going to create. We're going to click Finish. Okay, so now we've created our virtual machine. Before we start it, though, we need to change a few settings. And the reason is we're going to be running virtual machines inside of this virtual machine. Kind of a VM inception going on. And because of that, the various different things that are running inside of those VMs within VMs are going to be running 3 to 5 times slower than they would be if you're running them on bare metal. But there's some settings we can add to make them go faster. This is sort of the trade-off you make to sandboxing. If you're running it on your base system, it's less secure, but it's going to run faster. So we're opting for security, sort of keep this thing isolated from your host system so it can't reach out and do any damage to your computer. Everything will be self-contained in these VMs. So the settings that you need to change, they're a bit technical. You don't really need to know what each of them means. Just follow along and set the same settings that I am setting. I've got this defined over on my forum at paulscode.com. there is this thread called configuring Virtualbox to run Garbageman VM Manager. That's the name of the script I wrote. So we're going to go ahead and click on that. This goes into what I just talked about why it's why you want to set these settings. So we're going to go down to Essential Virtualbox Settings, and we'll just sort of follow along on this thread here. So it says to go to Settings, so we'll click on Settings. It says to go to Expert, we'll click on Expert, and then it says to go to System, so we'll click on System. And here it says to go to the Motherboard tab, so that's this one. And we want to enable IO API-C. All right, that's already enabled. We want to set the base memory to at least 8 gigabytes. I've already set it to, we did that on the previous screen. I've already set mine to 24 gigabytes, but like I said, just set it to whatever the maximum that Virtualbox will allow. And then it says to go to the processor tab. Here's the processor tab. It says to enable PAENX. Let's enable that. It says to enable nested VTX MDV. So let's enable that. It says set the processors to at least 4 cores. We already set that earlier to 8 cores here. That was on the previous screen, but you need at least 4. Then it says set the execution cap to 100%. So it's called processing cap. I need to update that. I put execution cap. So processing cap needs to be at 100%. Okay. And then it says to go to the acceleration tab. And there's a bug in the current version of Virtualbox, which I've called out right here. Sometimes when you click on the acceleration tab, the page will blank out. So it says if the page blanks, open the general tab and then come back. All right, so let's see if it does it. We'll click on acceleration. Yep, and you can see how the page blanked out. We'll go to the general tab and then come back to system tab. So now it's not blank anymore. That's a bug in Virtualbox. So, but we go to general, come back, and then it's populated. Okay, so what does it say to do? In the paravirtualization interface, we want to select KVM. Okay, so we're going to click KVM. And then it says to go to the storage settings. So we're going to be going to storage here. All right, we're going to use the VirtIO SCSI controller for the best IO performance. So it says click on add controller icon. So the add controller icon is right down here. That's the remove controller. The green one is add controller. So we're going to click on add controller. And we want to select VirtIO SCSI. Okay, so that was step 1. Step 2 says remove your virtual disk from under the controller SATA. So here's controller SATA. There's the virtual disk. We're going to remove that. That's this button here. It says remove attachment. Then it says remove the controller SATA. So we'll just click on controller SATA and we'll click the red button to remove that controller. Okay, so now we just got our controller IDE. It has our ISO file that we put in, and now we have controller VirtIO. There's nothing on it yet. It says to attach your virtual disk to the controller VirtIO. All right, so for that we need to add an attachment. It's a hard disk. And then we're going to select the virtual disk that we created earlier. So I called mine Garbageman, so I'm just going to click on that one. And then I'm going to click on choose. Okay. Then it says under attributes, enable the use host IO cache. So here's attributes. We're going to enable use host IO cache. Okay, moving on. Then it says to go to the network settings. Make sure we're attached to NAT, which we are. Set the adapter type to paravirtualized network VirtIO net. So adapter type here, paravirtualized network VirtIO net, this one here. Then it says to go to the display settings. So we'll click on display. It says set the video memory to 16 megabytes. It should have that by default, which it does. Disable 3D acceleration, should already be disabled by default. and it says to go to the audio settings and disable the enable audio. So we have enable audio here. We're going to go ahead and disable that. Okay, and then it just gives a summary of the things we just changed. We're going to go ahead and click on OK. All right, so I'll go ahead and close the browser there, move this window back where we can see it good. And now we're ready to start our virtual machine. So we're going to go ahead and click on Start. And it will take some time to load up. You'll see some text coming up. You can sort of ignore any messages until it gets to the first menu, which I'll show you. Oh, this is good. I'm glad this happened. So every once in a while, I don't see this very often. It's probably the third or fourth time I've seen this. When you start up your virtual machine, you'll see this fatal keyboard error. Okay? Whenever you see that, all you got to do is go to, I don't know what causes that, but all you have to do is go to Machine, Reset. It gives you a warning. Just click on Reset. Okay? And now you can see it's booted up. So it's going to land you in this menu where there's a bunch of different options. You can use the keyboard to go to the different options. The one that we want to run is called Start Linux Mint. So whenever we have that selected, we're going to press Enter, and it will boot into Linux Mint. Now you're going to see a whole bunch of messages, a whole bunch of text going by. You'll see some things that might even say error or warning. Don't worry about any of that. We're just waiting for it to get to the graphical interface. And it will take some time for that to happen. Okay, so the window has gotten a little bit bigger. I'm going to go ahead and move it so that it's easier to see. And one thing you'll notice on the edges here, we've got these scroll bars that tells you the window's not quite big enough. So we can actually go down to the corner and pull it out until those scroll bars disappear. That way we can see the whole screen. And again, we don't need to be concerned about any of this text. We're just waiting for it to get to the graphical user interface. It'll sit on this black screen for quite some time. Okay, so now whenever this page loads up, we're going to give it a little time to finish loading. Okay, so we've probably waited long enough. We'll go ahead and double click on Install Linux Mint. Okay, so now we're just going to basically just install it, pick whatever the default options are. We're installing Linux Mint. So kind of whatever it suggests, we'll go ahead and keep. If you want to make changes to different things like the language and whatnot, you can. I'm just going to click through it basically. Okay, on this step where it asks if you want to install the multimedia codecs, you don't need to install those. That's just, that's if you're using to play music and whatnot and videos. We're not doing any of that, so we can leave that unchecked. Click Continue. Okay, on this step it asks if you want to erase the disk and install Linux Mint. This is erasing the virtual disk, so this is just the disk that's on the sandbox. It's not erasing your host machine's disk. So we want to select Erase Disk and install Linux Mint, and then we'll click on Install Now. It gives us a summary of what it's going to do to the disk. We'll just go ahead and click Continue. Okay, and then we'll select our time zone and click Continue. Okay, and so now we're going to enter the account name for the virtual machine. This is the name that you'll use to log into the virtual machine. So I'm just going to use my name. Then we need a password. This is the password that you use to log into the virtual machine. And there's various steps along the way as you're going through the script that'll ask for your password. This is the password that it's asking for here. So create a password that you can remember. Okay, one thing that'll make your life easier is if you click on Login Automatically. Remember, this is a virtual machine that's running inside of your host machine. So your host machine will already have its own security, its own lock, screen lock, and so on, and log out features and whatnot. So it's not really necessary to have the virtual machine also have those. So it saves you an extra step of having to log into another computer inside of your computer if you have that login automatically checked. But it's not necessary. You can leave it unchecked if you want. So I'm going to go ahead and click Continue. And so now it's going to copy files, it's going to unpack them, it's going to install them, it's going to kind configure things, clean up, etc. So this is going to take quite a while. You just I recommend just go grab a coffee, take a break, and come back whenever it's finished. Okay, so once the installation completes, you'll have the option to continue testing or restart now. I want to click on restart now. Okay, it says please remove the installation medium and press enter. Virtualbox already removed the virtual installation medium, so all we have to do is press enter. And now we'll just wait for it to boot up again. We can ignore any messages that pop up. We're just waiting for it to get back into the graphical interface. Okay, once it loads up, we can see this welcome screen. We can uncheck this box so that it doesn't show it every time it loads up, and then close this window. Now, a couple of changes we want to make is to have the screen so it does not turn off, the screen on the virtual machine. So for that, we'll go down to the Linux Mint icon down here at the bottom of the virtual machine window. Click on that, and then we're going to search for screensaver. And here we're going to select to never start the screensaver. Next, we're going to click on that Linux Mint icon again, and we're going to search for power management. And then we're going to tell it to never turn the screen off. Then we can close that window. Okay, so that'll keep the screen on, so while we're working and stuff, it's not going to turn off. It'll just stay on so we can see what's going on. It doesn't affect your host, like I mentioned before, so if your host screen turns off, that's fine. But the screen on the virtual machine will stay on. Okay, the next thing we need to do is to install any updates that have come out since that ISO file was created. For that, we have this little shield icon down at the bottom, and it has a red dot by it. When there's a red dot, that means there are updates. So we'll go ahead and click on that. It says welcome to the update manager. We're going to click OK. It says there's a new version of the update manager, so we'll start by applying that update, and then we'll check for other updates. It's going to ask for our virtual machine password. This is the one we created earlier. Okay, when it reloads, it'll show all the updates that are available. Okay, here they are. There are quite a few, so we're going to go ahead and install those. And this will take some time to finish. So we'll install these, go take a break, come back when they're done. Okay, and so once the updates are completed, we'll go ahead and close this window, and we'll restart the virtual machine. So to do that, we click on the Linux Mint icon, select this red power button here, and then we're going to click on restart. And once again, we have to wait for it to completely boot up. We can ignore all the text and stuff that comes up and just wait for it to get into the graphical user interface. If you see any errors like this, we can just ignore them and wait for it to continue. Okay, and so once we're booted into the graphical user interface, we're going to wait for that shield icon to appear and make sure there's not a red dot on it. Okay, there's the shield. And we can see there's no red dot, which means we're fully up to date. Now that we've got our sandbox built and fully updated, let me introduce you to the script that I wrote. For that, we're going to go to the browser. So down at the bottom of your virtual machine, this icon here is the browser. We're going to click on that. When it first loads, it's going to open up a couple of tabs. We're just going to open a new tab and then close those other ones. And what we're going to search for is GitHub Paul's code. So GitHub PAULSCODE, GitHub Paul's code. Okay. We want the link to github.com. It's paulam@paulscode. This is my page on GitHub, so we're going to go ahead and click on that. And here we're going to click on the repositories. And we're looking for the Garbageman VM repository. If it's not at the top, you might have to search for it, but this is the repository we're looking for. Garbageman VMM stands for the Garbageman Virtual Machine Manager, or the VM Manager. I had an AI generate this image to help explain how it works in a non-technical way. So you can see that this picture is taking place in a playground. The playground represents the host. Now, whenever I refer to the host, I'm talking about the computer that you are running, that you installed VirtualBox on. So this would be your Windows, Mac, or Linux computer. That's the host computer. That's represented by the playground. Inside the playground, we have the sandbox. Now, the sandbox represents the virtual machine that we just created that's running Linux Mint. That's this window right here. Inside of here, this is isolated from the host computer. Everything happening in here is sort of behaving as if it's its own computer. It's sandboxed off from the main host. Okay. Inside the sandbox, we have the Garbageman VM Manager, represented by this guy with the orange cap. And his job is to assess the resources that he has available in the sandbox and to manage and control the instances of Garbageman. They are running in little virtual machines inside of the sandbox. So this is sort of like VM Inception. We have little VMs inside of another VM. Now, one important point is the Garbageman VM Manager. He is not aware that he's operating in a sandbox. He doesn't know anything about the host computer that you're running virtual machine on. So from his perspective, the sandbox is the host. So you'll see whenever we get into the script, a lot of times whenever the Garbageman Virtual Manager is referring to the host, he's talking about the sandbox. He's not talking about your main computer. Okay, so he's just talking about the stuff that's going on in this sandbox. This is the VM that we gave some RAM to, we gave some virtual CPUs to, and we gave, in my case, I gave 400 gigabytes of storage space. So this is the resources that he has to work with, and from his perspective, that is base reality. He's not aware that he's running inside of another computer. Okay, so what he does, he assesses the resources he has, he manages the VMs that are running Garbageman, and the very first thing he's going to do is he's going to create what's called the base VM. All right, this is the VM that's running Garbageman that he's going to copy and make lots of clones from. So the first thing he'll do is he'll create the VM, he'll pull down the source code, or he'll pull down an image. He'll run the initial blockchain download, or that'll already be done in the image that he's pulled down. But the point is, he creates this initial virtual machine. He does all the work on this one. That's where most of the time is spent creating this initial virtual machine. And then once he's created that one, then he can copy it as many times as he wants. And each of the copies gets its own unique address, and they operate independently. So then once he's created a bunch of these they go out and they infiltrate the Libre Relay network and disrupt its operations. So that's basically how the script works. So I also put together the sort of steps of what, sort of what the VM Manager does. He confirms the resources. Like I said, he sees how much RAM and CPUs and storage space you gave him. He builds that first node, syncs it, makes multiple copies. Each copy has its own address, and then you can start, stop, add, remove them as needed. All right, so there's a section running in VirtualBox. This is basically the same thing we had up earlier on my website at paulscode.com, talking about the settings in VirtualBox. We've already done that, so we're going to skip through that. We're going to get down to the quick start guide. Okay. So the first thing is we need to download the script. We're downloading the Garbageman Virtual Machine Manager. So each of these commands you can copy to the clipboard with this button here. So we're going to go ahead and copy that into the clipboard. And then what we want to do is paste it into the terminal. So the terminal is this little black icon here. So we're going to click on that. When it opens, we need to make it a little bigger. The reason is that I made a text-based user interface. It's a little too big to fit in the window when it's at its normal size, so we need to make it a little bigger. So don't forget to do that. So first thing when you open up the terminal, make it a little bit bigger. And then we're going to right click in there and paste from the clipboard and press enter. It's going to ask for the virtual machine password. That's the one we created earlier. Okay, so now whenever it's complete, we'll move on to step 2. We need to make the Garbageman Virtual Machine Manager executable. So we'll copy that, right click, paste. Okay, and then finally we need to run the script. So we're going to copy and run the script. This will install a bunch more dependencies, and so we'll just wait for that to finish. It will take some time. So you can basically ignore any of the text that's scrolling by. Once it's completed, it's going to drop us into a nice looking menu. So we'll wait for that to happen. I think it's important to mention that this video actually took me a lot longer to record than I expected, because the script worked perfectly fine on my development computer where I built it. But when I went to run it on my studio computer here for the video, I ran into lots of problems and I had to do a lot of debugging to get it working. I did fix all of those issues, but what that tells me is there's probably broader compatibility issues across different systems. So it will be helpful if folks try to run this, if you run into problems, to report it on my forum at paulscode.com, so that we can dig into and try to fix any remaining issues so that it's more compatible on more systems. I do plan to add a second method of installing the Garbageman instances. Right now they're installed in virtual machines. I'm going to create a second route where you can run them in containers instead of virtual machines. And the idea is if one particular route doesn't work, folks can try the other route, and on a particular system, maybe one will work and the other won't. So I will be putting out another video for that. I also want to add the ability to choose what node you're running, so you can choose to use this script to run lots of Bitcoin Knots nodes if you don't want to run Garbageman nodes. So there will definitely be a part 2 of this video coming out in the future. So let's get back to the script. Okay, the first step is to create what's called the base VM. This is going to be the first instance of Garbageman, which is going to be copied whenever we create all the clones. So kind of the way this menu works is you can't use the mouse. Like when you click on things with the mouse, it doesn't do anything. You have to use the keyboard. So you can use the up and down arrows to select the options in the menu. And then whenever you get to a particular option that you want to select, you can press enter. I'll go through each of these menus in a little more detail, but I kind of want to just start with sort of the quick start, so how you can get this up and running with minimal effort. So the very first thing you're going to do is create the base VM. So you'll select the first option and press enter. Okay, now there's 3 ways that we can build the base VM. The one I suggest is option 1, which is it'll import a recent snapshot from GitHub. This is going to get you going faster because this snapshot already has Garbageman built from the source code. It has already done the IBD, and so all you really will have to do is sync any blocks that were mined after that snapshot was created, and then you'll immediately be up on the Libre Relay network and blocking spam. So this is the option I'd select in most cases. Option 2 is to import from a file. Now this would be useful if you want to run this on multiple computers. So once you download from GitHub, it's going to go put it into the downloads folder. And then you could copy that, for example, onto a USB thumb drive, move it over to another computer, put it in the downloads folder on that other computer, and then you could import it from that file. And that would probably be faster depending on your internet speed than downloading from GitHub for each of them. The other thing you can do is you can build from scratch. This takes quite a bit longer. It takes, a couple hours or more to build Garbageman, and then you got to do the IBD to sync the blockchain. That's a day or 2, could be a couple of weeks depending on how many resources you have. It varies wildly depending on how much RAM, your internet speeds, your CPU speeds, and so on. So RAM is probably the most important there, but that on average is going to take 1 or 2 days in most cases, and like I say, could take quite a bit longer. But the benefit of this, you're not trusting me. So whenever you download from GitHub, you're actually downloading a snapshot of a node that I built and synced the blockchain on. Whereas if you build it from scratch, you're pulling down the source code, you're building it yourself, and you're doing the IBD yourself. And there's an export function. So if you do that route, you can then export it into the downloads. And then you can, just like before, you can move that between computers. If you built it on one computer, you can then copy it over to your other computers with option 2. But for the sake of this video and for the time, I'm going to select option 1 because I think this is the easiest route. Like I said, it does require a little bit more trust in me that that I've actually synced the real blockchain and not some version of it that's inaccurate. But I think for our purposes here, our goal is really the mempool policy. We're not too concerned about the blocks. So I think this is a good trade-off to have one that I've already synced. So we're going to choose option 1 here. I'll press enter. Now here, this will list all of the releases that, all the different snapshots. I'm going to periodically put a snapshot up on GitHub. And so these will appear in the list. So you're going to want to look at the date right after the V. The V stands for version. So you look at this date here, and you're going to want to pick the one that has the most recent date. Right now there's only this one, so we're going to select it. But in the future, this will be a list, and you'll pick the most recent one. So I'll go ahead and select that. Press enter. It says this is going to download approximately 22 gigabytes of data. That's the size of the snapshot. So if there's any concerns about data limits and so on, this is telling you how much it's going to download. So you can choose to continue or not. I'm going to choose to continue and press enter. At this point, it's going to the GitHub release and it's downloading all the different parts. The reason the snapshot is broken into parts is because there's a limit on file size for assets in GitHub. So I had to break this into 11 parts to fit within those limits. Once it downloads all of the parts, it's going to verify each one of them. If they're all good, it's going to then reassemble them, and then it'll verify the reassembled archive, and if everything's good, then it will install the VM from that archive. So we'll just wait for this to finish here. Okay, so now that the download is complete, it asks us if we would like to import it now. We'll go ahead and click on yes by pressing enter. All right, so it's going to ask us to choose the archive to import. We only have the one, so we're going to select it and press enter. Okay, so now it says it's ready to import the base VM. It tells you what it's going to do. It's going to extract it, import the disk image, create the VM definition, and then configure the system. So we'll hit yes to continue. Okay, so now it's going to go ahead and configure the VM for the initial sync. Now, one problem you may run into while you're running the script is it'll just drop you into the terminal with no warning. And the reason you'll know this happened is you'll see the screen text where it has your name at the name of the Virtualbox that you created, and you have like this blinking cursor if you click on the window here. Sometimes there'll be a bunch of text in front of it, so you might see a bunch of text, and then you'll be like down here on the window, and you'll have the green with the flashing cursor. So if it drops you into this window like this, one thing that seems to help is to reboot the virtual machine. So for that, we can close the terminal. So we'll click on that to close it. If it asks you, you're sure, go ahead and click yes. Go ahead and close the browser. And then go down here to the Linux Mint icon, click this red power button, and then click on restart. What this seems to be related to are there certain groups that the script adds you to at the beginning of the script, and they're needed later. And I've written workarounds for most of them, so hopefully that doesn't happen to you. But if it does, if you reboot the computer, then any new groups that you've been added to will apply on your next boot. So we'll see if this fixes it. Okay, and once you're back in, then you can go to the browser again. Search for Pulse Code GitHub. Then go to my page on GitHub again. Click on repositories. And then Garbageman VM. Okay, and then like before, we can scroll down to the quick start, which is under the Virtualbox section. Here we go, quick start. And we just need this run it command. We can use the run it command. You don't need to run these other two again. Once you've done those two, those only need to be run once. This is the one to run the script again in the future. So we'll click on that. And we'll open the terminal again. Remember to expand it out. And then we'll paste that in there and run it. We'll ask for our virtual machine password again that we created earlier. Okay, so since we had a problem with the script, the first thing that you want to do is you want to go to option 3, Manage Base VM. And we're going to go to the delete option. So if anything was partially built and partially created, this is a way to clear it up so we can start over again. So we're going to select that, delete. It says, are you sure? We're going to press enter for yes. And it says, are you doubly sure? Type the name in to confirm. So the name is GM Base. So you actually have to type in, it tells you what to type in, but you have to actually type in so you're not, if you're getting fast and clicking through stuff, you don't accidentally delete things. All right, so we typed it in, now I'll press enter. It says it's been permanently deleted. Now we can go back and select option 1 again. Okay, so like before, we're going to select option 1. This time we don't need to download it from GitHub. If we got past that step, then we already have it in our downloads folder, so we don't need to download it again. So we're going to select option 2 this time. Okay, there it is. If it doesn't find it, you'll have to go back and select option 1, or you'll go back and build from scratch again. So we're going to select this one, enter. That's going to verify it again, and then it'll extract the archive and install it. Okay, so once it imports the snapshot, it then analyzes the sandbox to see how many resources it has. And it's going to make some recommendations for how to break up the resources to maximize the number of Garbageman instances that you'll be able to run. For the most part, we can just accept the values that it gives. If you feel like tweaking them, you know what you're doing, go ahead and do that. Otherwise, just press enter on each step to accept the recommended reserves. So this first one is talking about how many cores to reserve for the host. Now remember, the script, it sees the sandbox as the host. It doesn't realize that it's running in a sandbox. So from its perspective, the sandbox is base reality. And so when it talks about the host, it's talking about the sandbox. So when it says how many cores to reserve for the host, it means how many cores is it going to reserve for the sandbox. It recommends 2, so I'm going to go ahead and accept that. Then it's how much RAM to reserve for the host. Again, they're talking about the sandbox. It recommends 4, so 4 gigabytes. So we'll accept that recommendation. Then it recommends to give each VM after the initial sync to give each VM 1 virtual CPU. So we'll go ahead and accept that. And it recommends to give each VM after the initial sync 2 gigabytes of RAM. We'll go ahead and accept that. At this step, it asks you if you want to allow the base VM to connect over both Tor and ClearNet. ClearNet is your IP address, that's the normal internet. You only have one of those, so even though you have a bunch of clones, only one of them can actually connect on ClearNet. And so this is designed where if you want, you can have the base VM connect over ClearNet, and then all of the other clones will be connecting over Tor only. You can select no for this as well. You just press the up and down arrows to choose what answer. You press the space bar to select an answer. Don't press enter. enter moves to the next screen. So you'll just go to the option you want to select and press spacebar to select it. And then when you're done, you'll press enter to move to the next step. I would recommend in most cases to leave yes selected because we do need to have at least some Garbageman nodes connecting to Libre Relay nodes over ClearNet. If all the Garbageman nodes connect over Tor, then that creates an obvious workaround for Libre Relay, which is they could preferentially peer with only Libre Relay nodes over ClearNet, which would bypass all the Garbageman nodes. So by having at least some of the Garbageman nodes operating on ClearNet, that doesn't open up that obvious workaround. But if you have a concern about your IP address being associated with running Garbageman, then you can select no, and that's not a problem. If you select no, then the base VM and all the clones will all connect over Tor, and so your IP address will be not be visible to the network. In this case, I'm going to go ahead and have yes selected, and then I press enter to move to the next step. This is going to give us a summary of all the settings we just went through. And you can notice that with these settings, the suggested number of clones that we'll be able to create alongside the base is 5. So we'll be able to run 6 instances of Garbageman on this setup. I'm going to go ahead and hit enter to accept. These next two, so whenever you run the base VM for the first time, there aren't any clones because you can't create clones until you've totally synced up your first node. So that means there's a lot more resources that the VM manager can give to that base VM for the initial sync. This will make, if you're building from scratch especially, this is going to make a big difference because the build time is going to go a lot faster and the initial block download will go a lot faster if you have more resources. So I would suggest accepting the values that it gives here. Even if you're not building from scratch and you're just needing to sync up from when the snapshot was created, having more resources for that initial run will even make that step go faster. So I'd recommend just accepting the values that it gives. It'll get through the initial sync, and then it'll bump the values back down to the ones that we selected earlier. So we'll go ahead and press enter to accept the suggestions. It's suggesting 6 vCPUs for the initial sync and just under 20 gigabytes of RAM for the initial sync. Okay, so now it's going to go ahead and apply those settings to the VM and run it for the first time. Okay, so the import is complete and the base VM is ready. So it says to choose the monitor base VM sync to start it. Press enter to move on. Okay, so now we're going to move to option number 2. This is the next step. Once you've created the base VM, whether you did it any of those 3 options, whether you downloaded from GitHub or you imported from a download or you built it from scratch, once that first step is completed, the next step is to monitor the base VM and wait for it to fully sync. Now, obviously, if you're building from scratch, this means it has to do the entire IBD, which will take a day or 2. If you've built it from a snapshot, it's just going to have to verify the blocks that have been downloaded since the snapshot was created. So anyway, we press enter once we select option 2. Okay, it's going to confirm the amount of resources that we want to give that base VM during the IBD. We just talked about this earlier, but it's going to, if you were building from scratch, you could potentially have different values for when you build the base VM versus when you run it for the first time for the IBD. Otherwise, these are normally you're just going to use the same values for both steps, but it just confirms in case you want to change them between steps. So again, it's recommending 6 vCPUs for the initial sync and just under 20 gigabytes of RAM. Okay, so now it's going to go ahead and create that VM, start it up, and then we'll be able to monitor the sync process. Okay, so this screen will come up here. You can see that right at this moment, the block's Bitcoin sync status was empty. Now it's not, just connected to some peers. It has to connect to at least one peer. It'll start pulling in these values here. Now the peers will often just drop because it wants to preferentially connect to Libre Relay nodes. You'll see this in a minute. Right now it's connected to, okay, So it had some other node, it dropped it, it preferentially peered to 2 Libre Relay nodes. So let me explain this. We have peers here. We have LRGM. That's either a Libre Relay or a Garbageman node. The reason it doesn't distinguish them is because you can't tell them apart. Remember, the Garbageman nodes are incognito. They're undercover. They're made to look exactly like a Libre Relay node. So we're connected to 2 peers. They may be Libre Relay. They may be Garbageman. We don't know. If we're connected to any Bitcoin Knots nodes, that'll show up here. If we're on any old core, that's basically core prior to version 30, they'll show up here. If we're connected to any core version 30 or later, it'll show up here. And then any other, there's a lot of other implementations as well. Those will just go into this other bucket. You can see Garbageman, just like Libre Relay, preferentially peers with Libre Relay nodes. So for the most part, you might see some other numbers pop up over here, but it'll drop those as it connects to Libre Relay nodes because it prefers those. You can see that the snapshot was created about 74 hours ago. We are on this particular block right here, and we need to verify up to the current block height, which is this number here. So we'll just wait for it to finish verifying all the blocks here, and then we'll move on to the next step. At this point, if you chose to build from scratch, it's going to do the initial block download, which is going to take a day or two. Once the blockchain has been fully synced, it's going to show that the VM is ready for cloning, and we'll press enter to return to the main menu. Okay, so now we can move on to creating some clones. So for that, we're going to go to option 4, create clone VMs. And the VM Manager will look at the resources that you've given it in the sandbox, and it'll determine how many clones it thinks it can make. And you can usually go with whatever suggestion it comes up with. In this case, it's suggesting that I make 5 clones, so I'm going to go ahead and press enter and let it make those clones. Okay, each time it finishes a clone, it'll say the name of the clone. It basically is going to be called GM clone. It's going to have the date and the time in this date time format here. So this will let you know when you created that particular clone. And we can delete, create new ones, start and stop them, which I'll go into later. But for now, we're just going to create each clone. Each time a clone gets created, it'll say that it's created and ready. And then you press enter to move on to the next clone. What this script does when it creates a clone is it copies the base VM, and then it removes any identifying information, such as changing the Tor address. And then it clears the peers database so that when the clone comes online later, it has to discover its own new set of peers, and that makes sure we're more evenly distributed across the network. Once the VM Manager finishes creating all the clones, we can start them all up and begin operations. To start up the base VM, we go to option 3. Here we can see we have options to start, stop, and state. State is going to show like what peers we're connected to, what types of peers, and so on. So that's similar to what we saw during the sync window earlier. This will get you into a window that shows that for the base VM. So you can see up here at the top, current state shut off. This tells you whether we're running or not. So right now it's off. We can start it. I'll explain a couple other things before we start it up. We have export. This will create an export into the downloads folder. If you recall earlier when we were doing step 1, we had import from file. That was option 2. This will allow you to create an export. So if you build from scratch, for example, and you want to share that build with other computers, you can use the export option and it will put it into the downloads folder. We have the option to delete the VM, which you're not normally going to do unless you're building the initial VM and you ran into a problem. You might need to do that. I showed that earlier in the video. But if things go well, you usually don't need to use the delete option. And of course, the last option is to go back to the previous menu. So right now what we want to do is we want to start up the base VM. So we're going to click on Start. Okay, it says it was started if it wasn't already running. Okay, so now if we go, now you can see over here at the top it says current state running. We can also go to the state window. And here we can see the state, once it reads from Bitcoin D, it'll fill in this Bitcoin status here. So yep, so here we can see the block height, where we are on the blocks. Once we connect to some peers, it hasn't connected to any yet, but once we connect to some peers, we'll be able to see what kind of peers they are, just like we saw earlier during the initial sync. We'll give it a chance to connect to some peers here. Yep. So you can see we've connected to one Libre Relay or Garbageman peer, and we've connected to one other. All right, so this is going to just start connecting to peers. So once you're done viewing the output here, you can press Q to exit back to the menu. Okay, and then we'll go back. So the base VM is now running. Now to start up the clones, we go to option 5, Manage Clones. And here you can see all the clones that you've created and whether they're shut off or running. So they're all shut off initially because we haven't started them up yet. You'll basically just go into one of the clones that you want to start up and manage. You just press enter. And here you manage it the same way that the base VM worked. You've got start, stop. We've got this force stop VM. This is an option I added for if the VM gets stuck and it won't start. It'll start, but it won't stop for you. You can force stop it with that one. That was a problem that I was seeing. You can check the status. It'll bring you into the monitoring screen like we had up a little bit ago for the base VM. Shows you, what peers you connected to, what type they are. And you have the option to delete the clone. So we'll go ahead and start it. Okay, it says it started. You can see the current state shows running now. We'll go down to check status in order to see the monitoring. And just like before, we'll wait for the Bitcoin D to report back. Okay, so this is the current block height. It shows our Tor address. It does show our IP, but remember the IP is only tagged to the base VM. If you selected yes, it won't be tagged to the clones. And then down here, like we saw before, we can see what peers we're connected to and what the breakdown of them are. So right now I've got one Libre Relay peer and one other peer. And this will go up as it connects to various and discovers different peers on the network. And that's basically it. You just start up the base VM, start up all the clones. They'll go out and discover peers, connect to the Libre Relay network, and block spam on any connections they make. So that's it for this video. Like I said, I'm going to be doing a follow-up video after I fix some problems and add new methods, ability to run Bitcoin knots rather than Garbageman if you want to, and another method for running the instances in containers rather than in VMs. So hopefully I'll be able to support a wider variety of systems. Like I said, it would be very helpful if you run into a problem to hop on the forum at paulscode.com and post the details about it. I can set up a virtual meeting with you. You can share your screen and we can try and debug the problem if you're able to spend a little time on it with me. Hopefully we'll be able to get this a little more compatible on more systems. So that's it for this video. I'll see you in the next one.